this afternoon session, we're going to change it up a little bit. And to start first, what I want to do is have each of the panelists, we've got a great panel here for this topic, have each of them take a minute to introduce themselves, which they can do better than I can. So start maybe here with Karina.
Yeah. So my name is Corinna Sundermann. I'm the head of IP of the Fresenius Kabi Pharma division. Fresenius, I don't know if everybody knows that company. It's this small company with 270,000 employees that no one has ever heard of. We do a lot of generics, and we do originator products and parenteral enteral nutrition, and a lot of products that get medical devices that get our products into the patient.
Yes, hello, I'm Lise Reiberg. I'm heading the global patents team at Novozymes. It's a Danish-based biotech company providing biological solutions to the world in terms of better industrial processes and so on. And one of the main products or product categories are enzymes. I recently joined Novozymes, so part of my experience for today's talk is also acquired through previous companies like Lundbeck, and so I've been in pharma litigation and to some extent on the opposite side as Corinna.
Yeah, hello, my name is Robert Sterner. I'm heading a team within the legal department of Audi AG in Germany. We have global responsibility for enforcing trademarks and design patents mainly, so we're a little bit separate also from the patent people. And well, as I have this global responsibility, I give some let's say, experience in single markets and certain problems we're facing there.
Thank you. So what we're going to do this afternoon is a little bit different. We've put together 4 or 5 sort of master questions to get the discussion going. And rather than holding our time for the questions at the end, what I think we'll do is at the end of each question, when the panelists have had a chance to talk a little bit about the issue, we'll open up the floor for 1 or 2 questions. Hopefully we can keep those brief because we don't want to run out of time. This could be a little tricky in terms of hitting our time limit. So if you have questions, please try to keep them brief after each of the master questions. So let's get started. The first question we're going to have is, what do you see as the biggest challenges for IP enforcement and litigation in the near future? And well, maybe we could start with Karina.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so from my point of view, the biggest challenge for us is, well, the quality of examination, because that results in difficult litigation if the quality is bad. Yeah, so for the generic industry, legal certainty is everything, really everything. Yeah, if you have an originator product, where you have 2 patents. One expires in 2022, one expires in 2025. For which date do you plan the launch? For which date do you invest? Yeah? If there's an opposition ongoing on the 2025 patent, and you don't know if that will be successful, then you have to have a product in 2022. You have to have that product because the price is completely down after 2 weeks. You have to be there at day 1. But if the patent survives, then you have invested too early. Yeah. So what you need is a good quality in examination already. Yeah. And all these approaches of the European Patent Office, acceleration, that doesn't really help. But from my point of view, the newest development here is the delayed examination. Have you heard of that? This is something that Mr. Battistelli has proposed in November 2017, and they wanted to introduce that on July 1st this year. And the idea is to postpone examination for 3 years on request of the patentee, which means that the patentee can delay prosecution, which means delayed opposition, which means delayed legal certainty. This is a problem. This is a problem for us, and this will be a big challenge for the next years.
Thank you. Lisa?
Yes. I would look to the world getting bigger, and there are more and more markets out there. Among the emerging markets, we know China, but there are many others coming up. And when it comes to enforcement and IP litigation, some of these countries are starting to get their gears up, being prepared for this, but there are so many uncertainties in what's the value of IP in some of these countries. Are there enforcement systems in place? What's happening? Can you stop infringement? Can you get damages? And are there qualified lawyers who can run the litigation? So one of the challenges I see is how to prepare for the world getting bigger and being on these markets.
Well, for me, from a general point of view, the issue is, of course, to create an impact, I would like to say, when it comes to enforcement. We have a very difficult situation when it comes to the quantity of cases we could have, and it's always the matter, we probably have the same situation or comparable, to pick the right targets, and to go for the right targets, to, let's say, use your capacities and your budgets in order to come to results that are valuable and reasonable as well, of course. And this is my daily business to a certain extent, to really to focus on the right targets in order to create that impact. And the success stories we also need to continue with our work.
Anyone have any questions about that issue, topics? Anything, challenges that you see upcoming in enforcement? Back here.
So I have a question concerning the collection of evidence in, for example, patent litigation. So currently I'm handling a possible litigation in China. So my lawyer friend from the UK instruct us to collect evidence. But before that, they have delivered a warning letter to the Chinese company. So that makes everything very difficult. So I want to know what's your experience in this regard. Thank you.
I can share that we are experiencing also challenges in the evidence collection in China. And there's one complexity adding to just finding samples, but that is that the evidence needs to be notarized, and it can't be more than, I think, notarization more than 2 months old, and then it's to be dismissed, and you can start all over again. So it's a real challenge in doing patent enforcement in China. I can share that.
Any other questions on that issue? No? Okay, should we move on? So you're all from different sectors. Do you think your industry poses unique aspects or challenges for IP enforcement based on your industry? And why don't we start with Lisa?
So in our industry, there's a new type of product coming up, which is microorganisms that are actually the product, for instance, for the biofuel preparation. Now a product could be a yeast strain, which is self-propagating, and the product is sold and used by whoever, a customer. But the product is self-propagating, so you throw it out there and everyone can pick it up and simply speaking, but could produce, start producing. So that's a challenge for us in finding ways to how to enforce patents on that, how to find, how to handle. So that's one challenge.
Robert?
Well, for the automotive industry, we are undergoing, I would say, severe changes in also our business. That means it's not only about selling cars any longer, it's selling mobility. And in this regard also, I think there are some other channels for us, for the business, to be covered. This is to a certain extent linked to digitization, that we need, of course, also to focus on that we have, for example, things like functions on demand, that you can add some further functions to your car in a later stage. And for us, it is, of course, important to think about how can we secure this business by implementing our rights. That means, for example, trademark rights. How can you do this? And this is quite a challenge for us. That means not only to be at the very end to enforce something that has already been registered, but to be at the very beginning in order to prevent the decision makers from making mistakes in this regard, and to secure the business with our possibilities in a legal sense. Mm-hmm. That is a big challenge, I would say, for the future.
And Karina?
Yeah. So the question on enforcement is not really the right question for me, because I'm on the other side, yeah. So I'm doing generics, so I'm challenging patents. But from my point of view, I mean, the pharmaceutical field is concerning enforcement really a very special field, because the only risk is at the generic side, yeah? So the patentee doesn't bear a risk at all. Why is that? Just imagine there is a patent which secures right now a high price, which is challenged, or which is, it's challenged, and in parallel, the patentee requests a preliminary injunction on an alleged infringer, and he usually gets the preliminary injunction. I mean, this is what we see throughout Europe. Yeah. So, for example, there is a nice case in the Netherlands, and I'm sorry for that. If you're not really in this field, you don't know the product. It is fulvestrant. Yeah. Fulvestrant is the formulation is covered by 2 patents. One of it has been revoked in the first instance at the European Patent Office, and the second has been revoked in Germany, also first instance. And guess what? The Netherlands have confirmed a preliminary injunction, even though there is really some doubt as to the validity of the patent. Yeah, I mean, 2 revocations, preliminary injunction confirmed. Great. Okay, so there is a preliminary injunction. The generic industry can't sell. But what happens if the patents get finally revoked? What happens? Well, the originator will have to pay some damages to the generic industry at generic price. Yeah? So they have this margin, and they pay this much to the generic industry. But who paid the rest? Who paid that? The healthcare systems, of course, because they had to pay for this high price. And they will not claim those damages. They won't do that. Yeah, at least usually they don't do that. There has been a change in Australia, yes. So in Australia, the government has requested damages. But in other jurisdictions, well, in Germany, for example, I have never seen that the healthcare systems claim their damages, which is quite bad, because in all other industries, there is some risk for both sides, yeah? So enforcing a patent means that you bear some risk, yeah? You have to pay damages in case that it's wrongly enforced. This is not the case in the pharma industry, because the price is so high, yeah, and the generic price is really low.
Thank you. Any comments on that or questions on that topic or anything you've heard? Yes, back here.
Well, if one believes that the patent system is there to reward innovation, which is why pharmaceutical patents are so successful, then you can argue that the pharmaceutical companies, the originators, have invested considerably in their products, hoping to have the patent protection to justify that investment. So they do bear risk. If their patent is proved invalid, they have put all that upfront investment for naught, because they can't compete with you. You don't bear any of the R&D costs. So your production costs are minuscule compared with the overhead that a pharmaceutical company has. So to use the old phrase, I think you protest too much.
Well, of course, there are different views on that, yeah. But the interesting thing is that usually the patents, where really litigation takes place, do not cover products where the development has still to be paid. This is not the case, yeah. So, for example, well, let's call Humira, for example, yeah. So Humira has paid its development already, I'm sure, yeah. But there's a lot of litigation on that product, yeah. So I don't think that there's anything what needs to be paid back to the originator. It has been paid back. And it's only these products, the top sellers, where there's a lot of litigation, not the ones who still need to pay their investments. Yeah, but I'm absolutely with you that we do need exclusivity. We need SPCs. We need exclusivity for a certain amount of time for drugs to have the incentive that they get developed, because otherwise we as a generic industry will not survive as well.
Any other questions or comments? No? Okay, let's move on. So why don't we start with you, Robert? Are there particularly any jurisdictions you found to be the most challenging regarding IP enforcement?
Well, of course, we have experienced situations where we could better enforce our rights, and others where it was a problem. Recent cases, for example, I realized some changes in Poland when I focused on Europe. Poland was a country where we were very successful at the very beginning, but out of a sudden there were some political changes, and in this regard probably also with the legal system a little bit we experienced there, what was a surprise for us. We have always problems. We had a very important case now in a design patent case on the European Court of Justice that was originating in Italy, and we learned that we had won all the cases in the different countries in Europe, apart from one other case that a competitor lost in Italy, and out of that case we got a decision from the European Court of Justice not in our favor at all, I would like to say, and that give us the situation that Italy is also special for us, and to a certain extent there's also some industry behind. In this case it was the replica wheels that are also produced in Italy, and we learned that this can be an obstacle when it comes also to enforce our rights. So, I mean, there are many other countries where we have, China is always an issue sometimes. We have good examples, we have bad examples. I cannot say it's not working there, but it's of course also on the case. So you also need to really check out what case you can go with in direction of courts, and how can you enforce it. But in general, there are quite different, experiences in these countries. It's not that positive for us.
Mm-hmm. Lisa?
So I would come back to China again, and there touch upon two things. One is it's very different in our industry to get claims allowed and granted that has a useful scope. Usually in our world of enzymes where it's easy to make slight modifications to an enzyme of 450 amino acids and then be outside of the claim in China, but maybe not in other places, then obviously it is a tough condition to be in having to navigate commercial activity in a country with very narrow claims and easily circumventable. So that's one issue. We actually had a success in that sense. We had a case before the Supreme Court where we actually eventually got claims granted which were not limited to 100% identity to the compound, but 99%. So 1% achieved in claim scope. So that was great. We have also, China is also being better and easier or they have a lot of focus in becoming more of a Western culture in terms of the IP respect. There's a long way, but a couple of years ago they set down the IP courts, and they seem to function pretty efficiently in deciding on validity and on infringement. Where the big issue is in China is on the enforcing the decisions, because that enforcement takes place before other courts. Meaning actually stopping an infringer. Once there's a decision of infringement, then have the infringer stopping the activities. The other thing is on damages, that they are hard to see. So you are not really compensated for infringement. And again, even for the small amounts, it's really tough to get the money from the infringer. So the second half, you could say, of the enforcement being enforcing the judgment, that's where there's room for improvement.
And Karina?
Yeah, so my patent litigation nightmare is Brazil. So in Brazil, you could more or less trust in the last couple of years that pharmaceutical patents simply didn't get granted, which has just changed. Yeah, and the new idea in Brazil, which I think is really dangerous, is that they want to grant the backlog of 230,000 patent applications just without any examination and leave it to the courts. Yeah, so that was the latest development that I was aware. The good thing is they excluded the pharmaceutical patents, at least at this point of time. But this is really difficult because there is no legal certainty. And again, I mean, this is what we need. Interestingly, it's the same with the originator industry. Yeah? So whenever I discuss with somebody from the originator industry, it's what they say is, well, what we need is legal certainty, and this is exactly what we don't have in Brazil right now. Yeah, legal certainty. We have no idea where it goes to. Yeah, so the typical situation, if a patent application doesn't seem to be strong, is that it gets rejected. Probably, well, after a while, it gets rejected, and then the patentee sues the patent office, yeah, and then it takes forever, and then after it gets granted, and it will expire 10 years after grant, yeah. So everything which happens there leads to more uncertainty, and that's a problem for us, yeah.
So I want to ask a follow-up sort of sub-question, and then we'll throw it out for questions. But so you've mentioned where you've had difficulties. What types of strategies have you found or tried to use to overcome these difficulties in the places that you named, whether it be China or Brazil or Poland? And maybe Lisa, you can start.
Maybe I would just add one comment to Brazil, which is if you are in litigation, then there are all these different appeal courts popping up, like political appeals and judicial appeals and so on. And it's really hard to understand how the process is running, so it can sort of continue forever. You think you are winning, but then suddenly another appeal is filed, and then all over again, and then that can take years. So I think that's another challenge of Brazil. So how to handle?
Strategies you might have developed to try and overcome those difficulties in China, for example, enforcing the judgment?
China is an ongoing learning exercise, so I don't have a solution there, right? But I think it's about trying to understand what's going on. So I don't have any brilliant idea.
Okay. How about you, Emily?
We normally usually go for projects. So once we have a project, we say we get the scope of the problem. For an example, we have in the single countries where we got information from, where we did a kind of research investigation. And then the issue, how we can do it, is of course also relating to what country is positive for us, is easier to enforce the trademarks or design patent, and what country less. And so we start, of course, with a positive story to get a better understanding, sometimes also on the problem. And there we have to consider the situation, the legal situation in the single country. And of course, another issue, we have also to think about costs, where it is very cost effective, and there are countries, of course, they are not that cost effective, and that plays an important role also in the strategy, how to start and to continue with a project, I would say. And for this reason, yeah, we're considering the single local situations and in the countries.
Okay. Karina, any strategies for Brazil and your frustrations there?
Well, for Brazil, there's probably mainly frustration, yeah. But for China, we have for pharmaceuticals, the situation is that you get a higher price if you have a patent, yeah. Which means that if you have an originator product, and we also have some originator product, you file a patent and you get a higher price, which means that they get challenged all the time. Well, defending patents is something that is necessary for us, and as long as we have the patents, the prices are higher, and others can't bid for the same tender because they don't have the patent and they are in another category. This is at least how I understand the system.
Okay. Any questions or comments about those? Yes. In the center.
Oh, he's really far away.
Hi. We're facing some infringement activities in a number of countries which are known to have a high level of corruption, and therefore we're being doubly wary. I wonder if the panel have any experience of how you can tackle such issues when you can't 100% trust the legal system.
Well, we bought an Indonesian company some years ago, and we lost 80% of the market share because we introduced our compliance guidelines. So, well, not a good experience.
Actually, I mean, it's really difficult. If you cannot trust the legal system, the jurisdiction there, it's always an issue. Either you leave the country, you do not enforce anything there, or you try. But very often what we learned is that once we are in contact with, let's say, police forces, because we do that enforcement also on the grounds with the police forces, you get a much better situation very often. They are motivated to support. They see this is also an issue to make them aware, of course, of the problem. When it comes to courts, indeed, you depend on them. If they do not support It's a problem we are fighting. We always try to get, of course, a positive result. We bring in good cases where we come up with good law firms, but I mean, it's on the decision of the court.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. So let's move on. And maybe we'll start with you, Robert, on this one. So what lessons have you learned along the way, for example, in ways to deter or prevent infringement in the first place, or other lessons you've learned?
Well, as I mentioned already at the beginning, the main issue for us is how can you, assuming that we have hundreds of thousands spare parts, for example, so this is an issue for us, spare parts, it's a safety issue, of course, it's an important business for us as well. How can you create an impact on that? What we learn is really that you need to analyze from the very beginning the situation in the single market, and that you really need to choose products, for an example, that are prepared for an online investigation, how you can easily detect certain infringers in order to come up with a strategy covering that particular situation. If it gets too complicated, if you do if you have too many obstacles, you will not be able to create a success story. And in our business, to a certain extent, we are also enforced to create success stories in order to, first of all, convince other decision makers to support further, also to show the scope of the problem, in order also then to prepare further trademarks that are registered or design patents that are registered, and really to argue on the grounds of real cases and experience in the company. Because very often I hear, there is a problem in general, the automotive industry, whatever. I learned that to come up with real cases that show the situation for us, for Audi in this regard, is always the best. And what is also very important, what we learned, is to bring in all affected parties, also within the company, because it is not a legal problem, it is a business problem. And we are the ones who can help to enforce the rights, but others are affected. And if we get the support from those guys that are affected, it's the R&D, it's sales, there are others. We have safety issues as well to cover. Then you get a better position within the company. They say, we need you to do this work, and it's in our favor, and we have the awareness of the value of IP and of enforcing the IP. And that is something that is motivating me really every day to bring in the people. This is also a matter for sitting here, talking about things and doing some public relations work also in this regard, because we think that we can only be successful once we bring in all the relevant sources and people that can support us in this matter. And sometimes it's easy, I mentioned already in our table discussion, that you say, you can also do the reporting on the success story. So it mustn't be the legal department that gives the amount of cases and of seizures and of compensations we got. But once, for example, the sales department is affected, if you do the report and say, we are successful in taking action against illegal competitors, this is your success story as well. We share it, and we make people happy with this in the company as well. So this is also kind of strategy that I learned. It's not only a legal issue, and it's not only the one thing that we should do, but we should convince others to support.
Mm-hmm. Lisa, anything you could add in your present position or previous position?
I think it's about confirming what you say. It's about being prepared in all sorts of ways. And one thing don't think you mentioned was also to be sure to have, when it comes to patents claims that actually are easy to police, that infringement can easily be proven. So that's one of the things you can actually do on top.
Yeah, so for our branded products, we always learn when there's a competitor product which somehow hurts our market units, yeah, and then we get to know the product, but there is no real system behind, yeah. So it's really something hurts. Well, this is close to ours, and we know that we have a patent, and then they come to us, and then we try to make a success story out of that, yeah. But it's not really a system that looks much, well, it sounds much better what you are telling. Well, we just don't have that many patents. That's another story.
Okay, we have questions? Yes.
I have a question. Mr. Sterner, I really concur with you to bring in all parties involved, and of course that involves not only all parties within the company, but all stakeholders outside of the company as well. And you will agree that a major share or the major share of the parts in the car are no longer manufactured by the car manufacturer themselves, but by suppliers. And wouldn't be bringing in all the suppliers in and supporting them in their own task in enforcing their rights be a good idea not to insist that much to get their parts unbranded from the supplier brands, so that they can actually enforce their brands as well with regards to those parts?
Well, I mean, you're talking about the. I mean, we have to focus. I'm talking about, of course, you know, the Audi branded parts. You have also we have many parts where we have also the trademarks from our suppliers on them, and we are quite happy to go with them together and to be active together, because it makes us stronger also in that case. So my personal position from a legal point of view, you're very welcome once you have your trademark on the parts. From a political point of view, of course, it's not my decision to enforce that you will be allowed to use the trademarks on the parts you are selling us. But this is also, I think, important from my perspective. I also learned that coming to the issue of enforcing rights, taking action in the anti-counterfeiting work, we also need our competitors. Yes, because in this regard, we are really sitting in the same boat. And so we do very often, we create bigger cases with involving competitors in order to be more effective in these cases. And I told you about efficiency and effectiveness. Effectiveness is and efficiency, they are all depending also on cooperations with others that are affected, and creating networks, of course, in a legal sense, with those guys who are fighting on the same side. So also with the suppliers, we're happy to work together. If they are prepared, unfortunately, I have to mention this, in certain cases, we tried it, and there is a kind of reluctance sometimes. What is also a problem for me to understand.
Any more time for questions, or are we finished?
I think we're done now,
Okay.
but I'm sure you'll all be in the joint reception, so
Yes.
we can carry on questions after.
Great job.